I never thought I'd be sharing this story publicly, but after what happened to me in Portland, Oregon last summer, I feel like people need to know what to watch out for when staying in Airbnbs. My girlfriend Sarah and I had booked a cute little studio apartment in the Pearl District for a long weekend getaway. The host had amazing reviews, 5 stars across the board, and the place looked perfect in the photos. Exposed brick walls, hardwood floors, and a cozy reading nook by the window. We were both stressed from our jobs in Seattle and really needed this break. When we arrived on Friday evening, everything seemed normal. The host, who went by Mike on the platform, had left us detailed instructions, and the key was exactly where he said it would be. The apartment was clean and matched the photos perfectly. We dropped our bags, ordered takeout from a nearby Thai place, and settled in for what we thought would be a relaxing weekend. The first weird thing I noticed was on Saturday morning. I'm usually a pretty heavy sleeper, but I kept waking up throughout the night feeling like someone was watching me. You know that prickly sensation you get on the back of your neck? That's exactly what it felt like. Sarah mentioned she'd had strange dreams too, but we chalked it up to being in an unfamiliar place. That afternoon, while Sarah was in the shower, I was lying on the couch scrolling through my phone when I noticed something odd. There was this tiny green light blinking from what looked like a smoke detector mounted on the ceiling near the bed. Now, I've never seen a smoke detector with a blinking green light before. They're usually red, and they don't blink continuously like that. I stood on a chair to get a closer look, and that's when my blood went cold. It wasn't a smoke detector at all. It was a small black device, about the size of a golf ball, with what was clearly a camera lens pointing directly at the bed. My hands started shaking as I realized what this meant. Someone had been watching us sleep. Someone had been watching us change clothes. Someone had been watching everything we did in that room. I called Sarah out of the bathroom immediately. When I showed her what I'd found, her face went white. We both felt sick thinking about what footage might already exist of us. But then I remembered something that made it even worse. When we'd checked in the night before, the host had sent me a message asking if we were settling in nicely and if we were comfortable in the bed. At the time, I thought he was just being a good host. Now, it felt incredibly creepy. We started searching the rest of the apartment with a flashlight app on my phone. That's when we found the second camera, hidden inside what looked like a regular electrical outlet near the bathroom door. And then a third one, disguised as part of a picture frame on the bookshelf that had a direct view of the kitchen and living area. I took photos of all 3 devices with my phone, and we immediately started packing our stuff. But as we were getting ready to leave, Sarah noticed something that made us both freeze. The front door had a security camera pointing inward toward the apartment. We could see a little red recording light that we hadn't noticed when we came in. This guy wasn't just watching what we did inside, he was recording everyone who entered and left. When we got outside, I called the police from the sidewalk. The officer who took our report said they'd been getting more and more complaints about hidden cameras in short-term rentals, but it was hard to prosecute because the cameras were often on the host's own property. He took down all our information and said they'd investigate, but he couldn't promise anything would come of it. We ended up spending the rest of the weekend at a hotel downtown, but the damage was done. Neither of us could sleep properly for the rest of the trip. Every time I closed my eyes, I imagined that guy sitting somewhere, watching recorded footage of us. The worst part was not knowing how long those cameras had been there, or how many other guests had been recorded without their knowledge. When we got home, I left a detailed review on the Airbnb platform explaining what we'd found. Within hours, the host had responded, claiming the devices were security equipment and that guests had been notified about surveillance, which was complete nonsense. There had been no mention of any cameras in the listing or in any of his communications with us. A few weeks later, I got a message from another guest who had stayed at the same place. She said she'd read my review and realized she'd felt the same uncomfortable sensation of being watched during her stay. She went back and checked her credit card statements and found several small charges from websites she'd never visited, charges that had appeared right after her stay at that Airbnb. The scariest part about this whole experience isn't just that this guy was recording people without consent. It's how professional and normal everything seemed. His Airbnb profile looked completely legitimate, with years of positive reviews. The apartment was clean and well-maintained. If I hadn't happened to notice that blinking light, we never would have known we were being watched and recorded. I've stayed in probably a dozen Airbnbs since then, but now I spend the first hour of every stay doing a thorough sweep for cameras. I check smoke detectors, electrical outlets, picture frames, plants, lamps, and anything else that could hide a recording device. It's exhausting and paranoid, but after what happened in Portland, I'll never trust a rental property again without checking first. The police investigation never led to any charges, as far as I know. The host's listing was eventually removed from Airbnb, but who knows if he just created a new account under a different name. The thought that he might still be out there, recording unsuspecting guests in some other property, keeps me up at night sometimes. This happened during my sophomore year at a state university in Michigan. I was living in one of the older residence halls, the kind with cinder block walls and tiny windows that barely let in any light. My roommate had moved out halfway through the semester to live with his girlfriend, so I had the double room to myself, which should have been great. But something about being alone in that building always felt off. The dorm was built in the 1960s and had this creepy institutional vibe. The hallways were always dimly lit, and there were weird noises at night, pipes clanking, doors creaking, footsteps in the hallway when no one was supposed to be there. Most of the other students complained about it too, but everyone just accepted it as part of living in an old building. I'm a computer science major, so I spend a lot of time in my room working on coding projects. That's probably why I was the first to notice something was wrong. It started in early March when I began feeling like someone was watching me while I worked at my desk. You know that prickly feeling you get when you sense eyes on you? I'd turn around expecting to see my roommate or someone at the door, but there was never anyone there. Then I started noticing my laptop acting strangely. Programs would minimize themselves while I was working, and sometimes I'd come back from class to find applications open that I knew I hadn't left running. At first, I thought it might be malware or some kind of virus, so I ran every security scan I could find. Everything came back clean, but the weird behavior continued. The breaking point came on a Thursday night in late March. I was working on a particularly difficult algorithm assignment when I heard this faint clicking sound. It was rhythmic, like someone taking photos, but very quiet. I muted my music and sat perfectly still, trying to figure out where it was coming from. The clicking stopped immediately. I went back to work, but about 10 minutes later I heard it again. This time I was sure it was coming from somewhere above me. I looked up at the ceiling, and that's when I noticed something I'd never seen before. A tiny hole in one of the acoustic tiles, just big enough for a camera lens. My heart started pounding as I realized what this meant. I grabbed my desk chair and climbed up to get a closer look. The hole was perfectly round and smooth, like it had been drilled specifically for this purpose. When I shined my phone's flashlight through it, I could see there was definitely some kind of device on the other side. I immediately called campus security, but when the officer arrived, he seemed more annoyed than concerned. He said students were always paranoid about being watched, and that the hole was probably just normal wear and tear on an old building. He barely glanced at the ceiling before telling me there was nothing to worry about. But I knew what I'd seen, and I couldn't let it go. The next day, I went to the maintenance office and convinced one of the workers to come take a look. When we moved the ceiling tile aside, we found a small digital camera mounted on a bracket, with wires running back into the building's infrastructure. The maintenance guy went pale when he saw it. "This definitely isn't supposed to be here," he said, carefully removing the device. "This is professional-grade equipment. Someone spent serious money on this." We called the campus police again, and this time they took it seriously. They brought in a tech specialist who examined the camera and traced the wiring. What they found was horrifying. The camera had been connected to the building's network and was transmitting footage to an external server. Based on the wear patterns on the mounting bracket, it had been there for months, possibly years. The investigation revealed that there were cameras in 17 different rooms across 3 floors of the residence hall. All of them were in single rooms or rooms where one roommate had moved out. The person responsible had been specifically targeting students who lived alone. The scariest part was learning how long this had been going on. The tech specialist found archived footage dating back almost 2 years. Hundreds of students had been recorded without their knowledge, studying, sleeping, changing clothes, talking on the phone with family, having private moments they thought were completely private. When word got out, the entire residence hall was evacuated while they searched every room. Students were relocated to other dorms or temporary housing while the investigation continued. The media picked up the story, and suddenly our campus was national news for all the wrong reasons. They never caught the person responsible. The investigation revealed that the cameras had been installed by someone with intimate knowledge of the building's layout and network infrastructure. The working theory was that it was either a current or former employee of the university's IT department, but they could never prove it. The external server the footage was being sent to was located overseas and had been paid for with untraceable cryptocurrency. What haunted me most was thinking about all the footage that existed of me. 2 years of recordings of my most private moments. Times when I thought I was completely alone and safe in my own room. The investigators said they'd tried to delete everything they could find, but there was no way to know if copies had been made or distributed elsewhere. The university offered free counseling services to all affected students. But how do you process something like that? How do you ever feel safe in your own space again, knowing that someone was watching you for so long without you knowing? I moved out of that dorm immediately and finished the semester living off campus. Even now, 3 years later, I still find myself checking every room I stay in for hidden cameras. I look at smoke detectors, air vents, electrical outlets, anywhere a small camera could be concealed. It's become an obsessive habit that I can't shake. The worst part is the uncertainty. I'll never know exactly what footage exists of me out there, or who might have seen it. Sometimes I lie awake at night wondering if videos of me are somewhere on the dark web, or if some stranger has watched me during my most vulnerable moments. It's a violation that you never fully recover from. The residence hall was eventually torn down and replaced with a new building that supposedly has better security measures, but I wonder how many other buildings on campuses across the country have hidden cameras that no one has discovered yet. How many other students are being watched right now without knowing it? I never thought I'd be the type of person to have a story like this, but what happened to me at a roadside motel in rural Arizona changed everything. I was driving cross-country from Florida to California for a new job, taking the southern route to avoid winter weather when my car started overheating about 50 miles outside of Tucson. It was getting dark, and I was in the middle of nowhere with no cell service. I managed to limp my car to the next exit, where there was nothing but a gas station and this old motel called the Desert Rest Inn. The place looked like it hadn't been updated since the 1970s. Faded paint, cracked asphalt parking lot, and a neon sign with half the letters burned out. The clerk at the front desk was this older guy with thick glasses and a nervous way of speaking. He kept glancing around while we talked, like he was expecting someone else to walk in. When I asked about the room rate, he quoted me a price that seemed too good to be true for even a rundown place like this. I should have trusted my instincts right then, but I was exhausted, and my car wasn't going anywhere until morning. Room 14 was at the far end of the building, separated from the other rooms by an ice machine and a utility closet. The key was an actual metal key, not a key card, which should have been another red flag. When I unlocked the door, the smell hit me immediately. That musty, stale air smell you get in places that have been closed up too long. The room was exactly what you'd expect from a cheap roadside motel. Wood paneling on the walls, a bed with a faded floral comforter, a small TV mounted high on the wall, and a bathroom that had seen better days. But it was clean enough, and I just needed somewhere to sleep until I could get my car looked at in the morning. I brought in my overnight bag and plugged my phone into the charger by the bedside table. That's when I noticed something odd. There was a small red light blinking behind the TV. At first, I thought it might be some kind of power indicator or cable box, but when I looked closer, I realized the light was coming from a tiny hole in the wood paneling behind the television. My stomach dropped as I recognized what I was looking at. Someone had drilled a hole in the wall and inserted a camera lens. The red light was the recording indicator. I grabbed my phone's flashlight and started examining the rest of the room more carefully. What I found made my blood run cold. There were cameras everywhere. One hidden behind what looked like a smoke detector, but was actually just a fake plastic housing. Another one disguised as part of a light fixture above the bathroom mirror. A third camera built into what appeared to be a digital clock radio on the nightstand, positioned to capture everything that happened on the bed. The most disturbing discovery was in the bathroom. A camera hidden inside a ceiling vent that had a direct view of the shower. Someone had put serious thought and money into setting up this surveillance system. This wasn't some amateur operation. It was professional-grade equipment installed by someone who knew what they were doing. I started to panic, thinking about how many people had stayed in this room without knowing they were being recorded in their most private moments. How many families, couples, business travelers had unknowingly performed for some sick person's entertainment? I grabbed my bag and headed for the door, but when I tried to leave, the handle wouldn't turn. The lock was different from the inside. It required the key to unlock it even from within the room. I was trapped, and suddenly the whole situation felt much more sinister. My hands were shaking as I used the key to unlock the door, and when I finally got it open, I practically ran to the front office. But when I got there, the lights were off and a sign said, "Back in 5 minutes." I waited by my car for almost 20 minutes, but the clerk never came back. I didn't know what to do. It was after midnight. I was in the middle of nowhere with no cell service, and my car was still overheating. I couldn't drive away, but I couldn't stay in that room knowing I was being recorded. Finally, I decided to sleep in my car in the parking lot, locked from the inside with the keys in my hand. I barely slept that night, jumping at every sound. Every time a car drove by on the highway, I worried it might be someone coming to check on their cameras. When morning finally came, I walked to the gas station and called a tow truck from their payphone. While I was waiting for the tow truck, I asked the gas station attendant about the motel. His face changed when I mentioned it, and he told me I wasn't the first person to ask about that place. He said other travelers had complained about feeling like they were being watched, and that several women had reported feeling unsafe there. But the motel was technically in the next county, so the local sheriff couldn't do much about it. The mechanic who fixed my car confirmed my worst fears. There was nothing actually wrong with my engine. Someone had loosened the radiator cap, causing the coolant to leak out slowly. It was the kind of sabotage that would cause a car to overheat at just the right distance from the motel to force travelers to stay there. When I got back to civilization and had cell service again, I called the FBI to report what I'd found. They said they'd look into it, but I never heard back about whether anything came of the investigation. For all I know, that motel is still operating, still recording unsuspecting guests. The experience left me permanently paranoid about staying in unfamiliar places. Now I always do thorough sweeps of hotel rooms, looking for hidden cameras and checking that all the locks work properly from the inside. I've found suspicious devices in 2 other places since then, a bed and breakfast in New Mexico and a small hotel in Nevada. It makes you realize how widespread this problem really is. But what haunts me most is thinking about all the footage that might exist from that night. Even though I left the room as soon as I discovered the cameras, I had already changed clothes and gotten ready for bed. Someone, somewhere, has recordings of me at my most vulnerable. It's a violation that follows you everywhere, making you second-guess every place you stay and every moment you think you're alone. The worst part is knowing that I was probably targeted specifically. The car sabotage, the too-good-to-be-true room rate, the clerk's nervous behavior. It was all designed to get travelers into those rooms. How many other people are out there who went through the same thing but never discovered the cameras? How many are still going through it right now, at motels and hotels across the country, completely unaware that their most private moments are being recorded by strangers?